So they took us to church and whatever. So when I started the converting, it didn't came to me like my parents were going to be very against it. Oh man, I was in for a surprise.
Welcome to Voices of Deconversion. We share the inspirational stories of deconversion told by former Christians who are now atheist or agnostic. Our stories remind us we're in it together. They encourage us as we discover who we are and help us to embrace who we become. Now here's Steve with today's guest.
Welcome back, everyone. This is episode 25, part 1. Today's guest lives near Mexico City. He's an engineer with a bachelor's degree in computer science. He was raised a liberal Catholic, and he is now a libertarian atheist, although he prefers the term skeptic, and he explains why in the interview. He has some very strong political beliefs, which we get into in the interview today. His perspective is unique, and not something that I've come across very frequently in the atheist community. Most atheists, like myself and many atheists I know, who deconverted from Christianity, went from a fundamentalist type of belief to a liberal atheist belief. But not today's guest. He's very honest about his opinions on liberal policies and left-leaning politics. Although many of us take similar paths, some of us end up in very different places, and that's okay. I think what he makes clear in his interview and his discussion with me is what's most important is keeping the dialogue open, to keep an open mind. It was really interesting to hear his perspective also on the religious landscape of Mexico, and specifically the transition that's been taking place in the last few years or last few decades. He was a part of the group Ateos Mexicanos, Mexican Atheists, and he also has a podcast called Masa Critica, Critical Mass. You can find his podcast on Spreaker. It started in 2009, and it airs every Tuesday, 10:30 Central Standard Time. Masa Critica is on Facebook, YouTube, and they even have a Patreon page if you'd like to support their podcast. I'll leave links to all these things in the show notes. He's a super friendly guy, funny. It was really fun speaking with him and getting to know him. So without further delay, here's my interview with Gerardo Romero of the Masa Critica podcast. We're just going to go ahead and jump in here. So I'm really curious to hear about the group that you've been a part of, and I guess anything you've been working on. So you mentioned that you actually have had kind of a radio show or a podcast. So tell me a little bit about kind of your involvement in those things. I'm interested in hearing about that.
I'm going to start a little bit where I was converted around the 2000. Basically, just a summary for start is I spent too much time. I'm an engineer. I'm a computer science bachelor. And it's weird because a bunch of bachelors in computer science end up being free thinkers or atheists. It's weird. I think it's a very high rate.
That's funny.
Bunch of friends. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's a bunch of free time. So I'll get into details later. But eventually I ended up like, okay, I'm not longer a Christian. Okay, a Catholic, practicing Catholic. I guess actually raised Catholic. And eventually I took, as I said, I took a couple of courses over there in Canada. Especially one that was ethics based. It was ethics or ethical. I think it was ethical education. It was a graduate program.
Oh, okay.
I was an undergraduate over there, but it was a graduate program because I wasn't able to get in the original program I was applying to from here from Mexico. Mm-hmm. The group was full, so I couldn't get it. And it was the first time I got into contact with a different point of view, like a different way of being ethical, okay, being nice to people apart from religion. So I got to study some stuff about Krishnamurti, welfarism, and different currents of ethical thought. So eventually I came back. I was at my first job, my second job actually, I spent a bunch of time alone. It was an afternoon job. It wasn't a 9 to 5. It was more like 12 to 8 p.m. So I spent a bunch of time. I had a bunch of free time after most of the people were gone, because most people were got out at 5. Most of the time, you have to be there. If something comes up, boom, you get spring into action, and that's where you work. But let's say at least 90% of the time, you may be just sitting there waiting for something, for the monitors to or the alarms to go off or something. Eventually, I got converted. I got into details later. This was around 2001. I actually met my wife around that time, so she's an agnostic, so it was good.
Oh.
We never were really, she was never really religious or particularly fond of religion. And so she's an agnostic. We have one kid. We're looking for another one.
Looking for another one?
It's crazy. It's crazy. It's like, okay, like evolution or something, like biological impulse says, have another one. But then says, no, stop here. That's enough. But yeah, so eventually, this was around 2001. So it was a lonely time because down here in Mexico, there weren't very many publications or stuff to read. So, for example, my very first book I remember reading was George H. Smith, The Case Against God.
Oh,
that was the only. I actually have that around here. I'll try to
you know what? What's funny? I might have that behind me here. Yeah, I actually do. It's right here on my bookshelf. Yeah.
Is the purple book. It's actually pretty good. The best thing I remember from it, I read it twice. The best thing I remember from it is the definition from George about the kind of the different type of atheism. So I think it's pretty good. Then eventually I got to read Dawkins stuff, Harris. As you can see, I'm citing or quoting a bunch of English writers because there's not much. There's basically no stuff in Spanish to read for. So I was lucky enough that I can actually read English because a bunch of people down here can't.
Yeah.
So most of my line of thought actually evolved from those writers.
From those writers,
Daniel C. Dennett, Kitchens. Okay, the Four Horsemen, basically.
Yeah.
Eventually, I get into this. Remember back in the day when there were no Facebook, no Twitter, there were bulletin boards. Bulletin boards were all the rage back in the ancient times of 2006 or something. So eventually in 2008, I came across this bulletin board called Ateos Mexicanos, or Mexican Atheists. So I started interacting them, and I don't want to make a long story of this. We got together. It was the very, very first time that I felt that sense of community. Most of the people that go to church will tell you that they go for the community. A bunch of people don't know what they believe, but as long as they feel togetherness and they feel nice with each other and stuff, they'll say, oh, this seems to be okay. So for me, that was a really new experience ever since I left the church. Not that I was very fond of church community, but you felt like you belonged.
Yeah.
So eventually we got together. We got some, and I mean we because it's also for my wife. We spent almost 10 years dating. We actually married a month before we got to be 10 years of dating.
Wow. So you guys you said you dated for 10 years?
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's a long time.
It's a bunch. We started dating back in 2001, and we got married in 2011. Just 1 month shy before we got to be 10 years of dating.
Well, you know what you're getting into, right? At that point.
Yeah. Most people say, and still, therapy works. Therapy helps.
Oh yeah.
There's still a bunch of stuff you never know until you're actually married.
That's true.
We actually we went up to live together for a year before getting married. And, well, still learning about each other. We have been together for almost 16 years now. Only five married, 10 more, or a little bit over 10 from dating. So that was our circle of friends. Eventually, in 2009, there were some connections made by one or two members of that. There was no association. It was just a group. And they got together and they got in contact with people from the Atheist Alliance.
Ah.
You familiar?
Yeah, I've heard of them.
Atheist Alliance International. So at some point during that time, they asked if one member of our group could go up there. They had this convention in Burbank, I think. Yes, it was Burbank, California.
Okay.
And to let them know what we were doing over there, what about atheists selling border and stuff. So you know how this is for an invitation. I want to go. Everyone wants to go. Yes. Okay. Do you have a visa? Two guys go over there. Do you know how's your English? Two other guys, and eventually it was just me. Everybody was okay. Gerardo is the one who's gonna go. And at the time, I had the time for vacation time. I had the language. I think I'm not that of English speaker, and I had about visa at the time. I still have one, and so I went over there. We got together, and it was really, really amazing to attend a convention. It was something very new for me, and I got very infatuated. And when we got back, when I got back, I told all the guys, okay, we have to do this. We have to start doing stuff like this, and let's shoot for an organization that is actually legal status for the organization. Eventually, stuff got tough. Okay, it was a break. There was a break between the group. Some people came over. I got together with some people. Some people went over their different paths. We were able in 2010. We made a couple of congresses, if you want to do. We made one congress in 2010, another one in 2012. In 2010, we actually got legal status. We are the only organization down here in Mexico formed by atheists with the interest of keeping separation of church and state,
Wow.
actually using promoting free software, Linux and stuff. It was a weird organization because it got amalgamated from a bunch of stuff around. So separation of church and state, promoting science, critical thought, etc., etc.
Okay.
After 2012, it's sad to say, or I usually don't like to say it like this, like, okay, I did this, I did that, I was the one doing stuff, but it's real. In 2012, 1 year after I got married, we were expecting our first child, and I got busy, and basically activity dwindled down. Everybody went up their ways, and basically the association is there. It's still dormant. It haven't done anything, and I'm pretty sure it won't do anything at least another 5 years. So it hasn't done anything 5 years. I'm pretty sure it will spend at least 5 years. But I have this idea that eventually it'll be needed. So we keep it alive. We have, as a legal status, we have to fill the forms, tax forms, exemptions and stuff. So we do it every month. We have an accountant, and I basically pay the fees for the accountant with a couple of friends that even if we are not active, we are still good friends. We see each other from time to time.
Cool.
And that's what we do. So the association's got legal status. It can do stuff, but there's actually no one there to do it.
So how big was
How
big was Ateos Mexicanos?
Maybe 50, 60 members at the time, at the top of the peak. The thing here is, as one of my dearest friends says, is Mexicans don't feel that urge or that they don't feel that they are challenged or they are really in danger. Like, okay, it's not like in America or the UK or something. Like really, the conservatives are really ramming. Yes, we have just last week one of the governors back there in Monterrey said, okay, again, like why are natural disasters happening? Why hurricanes? The earthquake down in Mexico City is because we are being too liberals with faith and blah blah blah. But it really doesn't ring a bell to most Mexicans. So that's why people are not very vocal, and also quite different from Saxons. We call most of you guys Saxons.
Does that just encompass like Europeans and North Americans?
Yeah, that culture is more prone to donations, to for moving money around. You see a cause and you rally around it. And Mexico, that doesn't really happen. We are very, very distrustful. We're not very trusty. And so when it comes time to give money, people always think, this guy's gonna take it away. He's gonna take it and run something. Yeah,
Yeah.
so it got difficult, and eventually, as I said, it dwindled down. So the association is there. If you go over to the site, it's up, and I am actually thinking bringing it down after 5 years because there's no one paying for the maintenance. It's a yearly maintenance. So I'm
Yeah.
thinking of just saving the name and putting maybe in a cheaper server with maybe
Oh, okay.
just a welcome page. But it's gonna be there. It's gonna be still there. Actually, the association when it was created, it gets created for 99 years. That's the standard in Mexico. So it's still gonna be
Oh,
there.
wow.
At some point, I said, well, I can't really do anything else for the association right now. Maybe I'll do it eventually. So back in 2009, when we were at the peak of this, a bunch of guys in the group used to write. They wrote articles. They did essays and stuff, very good stuff. And I've never
Wow.
been a very good writer. I tried to write a couple myself, and I actually have them over saved them around somewhere. But I wasn't very good at that. So I said, what am I good at? And I say, okay, this talking thing, I do this talking thing a little bit too well. So I said, let's do a podcast. And with a friend of mine from that time, we made Masa Critica, that's critical mass.
Ah,
And
cool.
it started in 2009. It was an episode every month. We got together, we recorded it.
And do you still do the podcast from time to time?
No, actually, that's what I tell you. That it became a regular show. This is broadcast weekly. It's a weekly show,
Ah,
and it gets saved in podcast form. So I
wow.
broadcast on Spreaker every Tuesday, 10:30 local time.
And that's Central Time in the U.S.
Yeah,
or
yeah,
whatever. Yeah.
guys, Mexico City's times. I had my own share of guests. I had Richard Dawkins came back in the day, Dan Barker,
Oh, wow.
and personalities around here from Mexico. There are a couple of writers here and there. So have a couple of deputies that came to the show and stuff for a congressman. One congressman came like a couple of years ago. So and all the episodes get uploaded over in Spreaker and eventually to the official site, the first site to send you, because a bunch of people still download from there. And eventually, I was thinking about a couple of years ago to give it up, sorry, to give it up, or to make it more casual, like maybe record an episode maybe once a month or something. But then one guy in my audience said, "Okay, why don't you try Patreon?" And basically, Patreon was the impulse I needed. So I now people give me money, so I basically have to do it. I have to do it every week. Yes, they're basically my
That's
patrons.
cool.
They're my patrons. So it was a guy's impulse, and we have done stuff each year on the birthday of the show. We get together. Starting last year, we started getting together. So people I've never seen came and tell me, okay, I like your stuff. Okay, maybe it's a very small thing, but you touch some lives along the times, along the years I've done
Yeah.
podcast. I've received a couple of really touching letters for him. So there was this guy in Tamaulipas. That's in no, sorry, not Tamaulipas, in Nayarit. That's on the other coast, on the west coast of Mexico. That was he was a shrimp fisherman, and he said, I learned a bunch of things from your show. I basically download the episodes and go away to the sea, and I spend 2 or 3 days away. And when I'm at sea, I hear your. That's really really touching, and I've
Oh,
been very glad
wow.
being able to touch people that really without the internet or without this impulse, this urge to do something, it wouldn't be possible.
Well, that's awesome. I love that. Yeah. That's so encouraging. And you said this is a radio show. It's on like a local radio show. I know you can get it on Spreaker for people who aren't local, but
I'm actually quite, how to say, quite colorful, colorful language. I'm
oh, gotcha.
Yeah, so I wouldn't
Yeah.
think I will be very popular in a local radio station or something. So I have no boundaries. We treat every mostly these days is politics, a bunch of politics. Sometimes yes, we treat religion and critical thinking, science, but a lot of these days, maybe last year, it's politics. Eventually, the thing here is that this is where I wanted to come up for a couple of maybe 10 minutes from now. This is where I wanted to come up. Eventually, first you deconvert, and for me, and I've seen this around from other people that I have spent time over the years, is like when you deconvert, and I think that this is really what happens to a bunch of converts to other religions. You deconvert or you convert, and you feel awesome. You feel this, wow, I finally know what I believe, what I think. For me, it was I spent maybe a couple of years going through agnosticism, eventually arriving at atheism, and my perspective is basically that of Dawkins. I'm like an agnostic atheist. Like, okay, I'm a practical atheist, but I still reserve a small amount of agnosticism, basically saying I can change my opinion if I get good evidence. Okay, but it's mostly probable that there are no gods. That moment is really important for most people, that they convert, I think, to other religions. You wanna at any given time, you want to pop up the subject on everyone. Oh, I'm an atheist. I know about science. This is great, and there's no afterlife and stuff. And you actually come like a little bit like a prick. Really, yeah. Yes. If I could travel back in time, like grab Doc Emmett Brown's time machine and going back to 2003 or something, I will really slap myself and get over with, man.
Because you're just so excited about it, right?
I always have this analogy. It's like Superman, but instead of an S, it will be, well, actually, it's not an S. In his planet, it means hope. Okay, whatever. Okay. Instead of the S, you will have in Spanish like an SA, like super atheist. Like you believe like you are super atheist and you're going to get people out of their error or whatever, their mistakes in life, and you want to do it right away. So eventually, I felt that really atheist is not something that really defines. So I became, I started to define myself as a skeptic, because atheism is just a sub part of being a skeptic. Is being a skeptic of gods, of the supernatural. And this mainly started to happen because I interacted with atheists that believed in ghosts, believed in UFOs, believed in abductions, and a bunch of stupid stuff, homeopathy and stuff. So I said, okay, atheism is not as cool as it sounds. It's just being skeptical of gods, but you still believe in a bunch of stupid stuff. So eventually I became skeptic, and it was more and more that I was less adamant about my atheism. And then I came in contact. I'm sorry, maybe you're going to hate me. You're going to start hating me because we have very terrible reputation. I became a libertarian.
I don't care. That's fine.
No, I really, believe me, most people think we're like alt-right dudes, crazy guys. No, basically a libertarian is no conservative or liberal. It's a libertarian. I don't care who you make business with, and I don't care who you sleep with. I don't care what you do with your body as long as you do it to yourself and you don't fuck with me. Sorry, let me finish. And I don't care what you do with your money. So these days, the show is mostly a critical thinking libertarian show. From that perspective, is that we basically tag all the subjects, all the things that we talk about in the show.
So critical thinking issues, politics, stuff like just a variety of things like that, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as a libertarian, as I understand it, I mean, you wouldn't be too hot on taxes. Like lower taxes is kind of the
it's basically lower tax and regulation, but that doesn't work if you don't also stop government spending. That's the thing. It goes hand in hand. You have to cut your spending. It's just like a regular dude. If you want to cut spending because you want to have less income, because you want lower taxes, you have to cut your spending.
Mm-hmm.
Problem with government is usually keeps going up the spending, and no taxes. Well, where are you gonna get that extra money? Debt. Most of the time, it's debt. Yeah, it's a bunch of stuff. It's not that easy. For example, I'm pro-gun. For example, here in Mexico, guns are outlawed, are completely prohibited, and we have 15 homicides for every 100,000 people. I think in the U.S. you have 3.9, even with the massacres, the thing in Las Vegas, San Bernardino, Orlando. That is terrible, but you still have a fraction of what we have down here. And guns here are completely allowed. You can't have any kind of guns. Yeah, guns are forbidden.
But you still have this high rate of murder and violence.
Yes, it's incredible. And it's a bunch of violence. You can be gunned down for being mugged in the street. And really, there's no way. A good way of thinking is we could have some gun regulation. That's the thing with the U.S. too. Even if I'm a libertarian and I'm like a pro-gun, I think some regulation needs to be in place. That is why I'm a libertarian and a minarchist, like a small government. I'm not an anarchist. I have some friends that are anarchist capitalists. I'm a minarchist. I say, okay, small government. I don't mind if we eventually get rid of government, but I think we have to first make it small, very little, and eventually it will be easier to get rid of government. But right now, going and get rid of government all the way, it's kind of on a utopia.
Yeah, and it could cause chaos if it happened all of a sudden, that kind of thing.
So I became this weird mix because...
That is really interesting, because I don't think too much about the politics of Mexico, because I'm not in Mexico, but it's interesting to hear, because up here, like, libertarians, usually you have your conservatives and like your liberals, and then libertarians are more conservative. They're kind of like a type of conservative, So it's interesting to hear that, your political leanings, yeah.
We lean more to the conservative side, and I'm actually, after years of spending time with leftists, because atheists here in Mexico tend to be leftists, I found myself, okay, I don't like these guys, really. Okay, they're atheists, but I don't like these guys. These guys are pro-government. They want to take away my rights. They want more taxes. They want this redistribution of wealth. They like government spending and stuff. And I really don't like that. So eventually, I arrived to a point where with the libertarians, I spend time with atheists. There are a bunch of libertarians. Most of the libertarians here are atheists.
That does make sense, kind of, yeah.
But I have at least 3 or 5 very good friends that are Catholic.
Catholic, okay.
Really hard-side Catholic, like Latin-speaking Catholics from conservative schools. And I find myself spending and having a better time, enjoying myself better with these atheist leftists.
Wow, interesting. Yeah, because like I'm, it's I don't know if it's much different in America. I mean, politics is kind of politics. It's either big government or small government. It's all the same kind of issues, pro-gun or pro-regulation, and different variations of it. But I'm probably more on the left-leaning side. But I'm always open for good discussion and good
That's the thing.
Debates.
That's the thing. And we have been seeing here, I think in some parts of America, and mostly in a bunch of parts in the world, is that the debate is being hindered now by people in the left. For example, I'm not fan of Ben Shapiro or Milo Yiannopoulos, but I always think that it's very important to hear all the aspects of the argument. And I'm always against prohibiting someone from speaking because you look bad. Okay, they say, okay, but they're advocating for violence or whatever. Okay, I think there's a very thin line there when it's advocating for violence and freedom of speech, free speech.
Right. That is a really difficult line to draw.
Yeah, but we have to try. And forbidding someone from speaking is never a good policy. So that's where I am at the moment. and I want to go. I think you want to learn a little bit about my deconversion, so that's why we are here.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So,
To point out where I am now, so you can trace a line. And it's weird. In like 12 years, I came from here to here. Basically, a born, raised Catholic that was liberal enough to, at some point, this cognitive dissonance, this spirit, there's ghost that's called this cognitive dissonance that appears just like the ghost of Christmas past, Christmas future pops up over before you, and okay, this doesn't sound right. And eventually arrived at this point when I'm a libertarian. I have a bunch of left stuff like social liberal, like I'm pro-gay marriage, I'm pro-abortion, or in this case, no, I don't like to say pro-abortion, pro-choice, pro-options, and pro-euthanasia, and whatever you want to do. And I'm pro-drugs. If you want to put whatever you want in your body, as long as you don't hinder myself, you don't mess with me or my property, okay? Like, if you want to die or overdose, it's up to you. Do it. But what happens if you overdose while driving a car and kill my wife? Then you have a problem,
right.
Okay?
Now
that's the thing. Yeah. That's the famous, the most important thing for libertarians is the NAP, the non-aggression principle. But if you actually act in aggression, I have the right to respond in full force. But you never start the aggression. That's the NAP, the non-aggression principle. And on this side, it's weird because I'm actually a conservative. I'm for the family, but for me, if you don't want to have a family, or you want to have a big family like big love stuff or poly love or whatever, it's up to you. But I'm pro family. I'm for open markets. I'm from deregulation and stuff. Basically, I'm for freedom. Like be an adult. That's what I learned. Like, be a fucking adult. Okay? If the speech you're hearing on TV offends you, change the damn channel. Turn over to another YouTube video or whatever. If something you don't like, speak about it, but don't go lobbying politicians or whatever to censor it or whatever. That's what I'm for. Okay? So, small summary of my deconversion. Up until 1999, I was a born, raised Catholic.
Okay, before you jump into that, let me. I have some questions I want to get to. So, starting like basically at the beginning. So, would you have called yourself a Catholic or a Christian? Just real quick.
Catholic. Yeah.
Okay, so when you were raised as a child, tell me a little bit about how Catholicism influenced you.
The thing is, my parents gave me like the wrong impression, at least for me. I don't know about my siblings. I'm the oldest. I'm the firstborn of 3 children. My brother is 5 years younger, and my sister is 17 years younger than myself, and she's adopted.
17 years younger? So you're the oldest of 3?
Yeah. I'm 41. Okay. My brother is 37, and my sister is 24. Again, cool. She's adopted, and we love her very much. Okay, but so it's a weird family. We were nice. Most Catholics wouldn't like adopted children here in Mexico.
They don't adopt.
Yeah, they're not very much for adoption. So this is 1999. So I went to church with my parents. Our parents always took us to church on Sundays. But really, in our lives, like, there was very important. Religion wasn't like that important. It was important from a sub-context. And for example, I couldn't do a test without doing the Holy Cross or whatever.
Doing the cross, okay. Sign of the cross.
I felt the need for that. I always talked to God before going to sleep and shit. But it wasn't like very stringent, like very strict, okay? So they took us to church and whatever. So when I started converting, it didn't came to me like my parents were going to be very against it. Oh man, I was in for a surprise.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll get to that in a moment. But so That's kind of a good summary of, it wasn't super strict, but it was part of kind of the culture
Yeah,
of your family. And obviously I know like Mexico is very like a strong Catholic.
still, still, but changing. Uh, like maybe in the last 30 years, Catholics have dwindled down from like 98% of the population, 30 or 40 years, to just like 81%.
That's kind of a
Yeah,
big drop. I
especially
mean, 98. I
yeah,
can't believe that.
98
That's
and became
crazy.
82 or 81 and dwindling
Wow.
down. And if you take into account the country is almost 500 years old, it was no change for 460, 450 years. So
Yeah.
what happened?
Yeah, what did happen? What do you think?
In the 90s, Mexico opened to the world. NAFTA, trade, and this also affects market of the faith. That's what I call it, the market of the faith. More options, people start mixing and getting more. For example, there are a bunch of Mormons down here now, Jehovah's Witnesses, and a bunch of different Christian. I don't want to call it sects because they are not sects. I will say a bunch of religions, Christian religions, evangelicals, Methodists, Baptists,
Mm-hmm.
Pentecostals. Pentecostals, man. Oh, these guys are crazy.
I had some background in that.
From Brazil. Yeah, revivalists. Oh,
Yeah.
no, no, yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Speaking in tongues and yeah, all that.
yeah. Those guys are crazy. So those have been taking a bunch of the Catholic population into their flock. So now it's like 4.5, almost 5% no religion. So it's
Okay.
not that bad, but still, most people are not abandoning religion; they are just converting. And if you ask me, I like
Yeah.
Mexican Catholics because they don't pay attention to their church. They're basically there. So they're good
That's
guys. Most of
awesome.
the time, they don't.
That sounds like American Catholics to me, to be perfectly honest. Not all Catholics. Obviously, some are very strict, but no, American Catholics, yeah. It's like church on Easter and Christmas kind of thing.
Yeah, most Catholics are nice because they don't pay attention. They do everything but what their church or the Pope says. The
Yeah.
thing is, the evangelicals, the other Christian sects, Jehovah's Witnesses are much more stringent and they are much more vocal. And that's why I think
Yes.
eventually our organization is going to have some work cut out for it. But eventually, right now it's like that.
Yeah. Well, when you were growing up, what did God mean to you personally? Like as a child, but also kind of getting into like your high school age, teenage years. What did God mean to you personally in those years?
For me, it was as I'm telling you, it was important. It was always thank God for this, thank God for that. I spoke to God every night. I thought that's why when someone said, "No, you weren't a real Catholic, you were a real Christian." No, dude, I really believe in this shit. I really believe I was talking to God and whatever.
Uh huh.
And but still, it was weird because I remember my dad coming back home from work, tell me, "Okay, read this," and he brought me encyclopedias and stuff and learn. So I was like, I came eventually came up to this term that is compartmentalization. Stuff like
Yeah.
compartments, they don't mix. The thing is, when you eventually arrive at a cognitive dissonance, when they
Uh
become
huh.
in conflict, that's when everything falls apart. You'll say, I never thought about this. This really doesn't make that much sense.
Up to this point in your life, before realized you didn't believe in God and told your parents, before all that, what else is important about this time in your life?
God was important, but not born again Christian important. It's there. We go to church. We celebrate Christmas. We're happy about being a family, a Catholic family, and that's pretty much it. Then when I went up there to Canada, those 6 months, it was important for me. Actually, my sister has
How old were you when you went up to Canada?
23.
23. Okay. And you were still a Catholic
Yeah, yeah.
at that time.
I
Okay.
went, I went over a Catholic. Yeah,
And why did you go up to Canada again? You told me, but I can't.
a student interchange, student exchange program. Yeah. So I went over to for a graduate semester, for undergraduate semester, undergraduate, but still the ethical course I took, it was a graduate program because there wasn't any more space in the group that I wanted to get enrolled with in the course that I was trying to get enrolled. So I went there, a working Catholic, important, and I think my sister still has a letter I wrote back, an email. I think she printed it, and she has hanging in her room. And I mentioned God several times, like, oh man, you can't believe how nice is the snow. This thing up here is awesome. Canada is awesome. God this, God that, thank God. And when I came back, it was very changed because I had a bunch of time to think for myself. I had this course in ethics and stuff. So I started like my nuts started to crack. Not very important, not very noticeably, but I think the damage was already done. Oh. And then 6 months after I graduated, I got a job, and I said my job was spending a bunch of time, of free time or alone time. So I remember this page that was called Conservative British Christians or Catholics. No, Conservative British Catholics. It doesn't exist anymore, but at that time, I don't remember how arriving there. I was surfing the net. I arrived in there, and really, they had these guides. Okay, if your kid masturbate, you have to send it over to us, and they have this instruction of how to actually package your kid, like in an actual box, and send it over there. And this must be a freaking joke. But as much as I started looking around for a joke, for this is satire or something, they were really, really serious about this shit. And there was this mailbox where the people ask about, okay, my husband masturbates and then it doesn't come to me, and said, oh, okay, your husband is an agent of Satan. He has to stop that onanist practice and stupid shit like that. And the more I read, I said, this must be a freaking joke, but I couldn't find the joke. And they had this small space that was called the corner of hell or something like that. And it basically said, don't click here. And what do you know?
Of course you're going to click there.
You're just human. Damn it. And it listed several atheist sites.
What?
Like, these are the devil. This is Satan and shit.
Oh,
and I remember it was I don't know if the site's still up. It was called From A. Barnett. That's the one I remember.
A. Barnett?
Barnett. And it was a guy. It was like a blog. And it got questions about the flood. It had questions about the virgins and the incest in the Bible. And eventually I started reading. It's just like the Matrix. It was my freaking red pill.
Wow.
Went down the rabbit hole. And the more I read, I said, okay, I have to find the answer for this. But the more you look for answers, you actually find none, and you get more and more and more critical. I spent like maybe 3 or 4 months reading every day and stuff. And at some point I said, damn it, I don't believe this shit anymore. I'm not a believer anymore.
It was this website that did it. So the website, from what you said, it sounds like it was like was it like a fake Christian site?
I don't know. I never found anything that made me the certainty that it was satire.
Okay, but they had this little section where it said, don't click here, and you click, and then it basically is like...
Those were real atheist sites. Those were our real atheist sites, yes.
Okay, so it makes me think that they were trying to kind of lure Christians in to get them to start thinking, and in your case, I mean, kind of worked.
Who knows? Yes. For me, it was like the last nail in the coffin. I had some doubts about the stuff, like, okay, there are other ways to be ethical. There are other ways to be good. That I came back from Canada. I spent a bunch of time alone, a lot of thought, inner thought that you usually don't stop and think for yourself in that case. And this was like again, the last nail in the coffin. And maybe I spent like a couple of months after those 3 months, and it's really difficult. For me, it's usually I do this analogy of living drugs, like being, like in remission or
Yeah.
Or I don't remember the syndrome you get from when you leave the drugs. You get this syndrome from
like just withdrawal.
Yeah, the withdrawal syndrome when you have like you have the need for the drug, but you are not having it anymore. You're not taking it anymore. So it's very difficult because all your ethical, your human, your background foundations come crumbling down.
Yeah.
You don't believe what you have believed for up to that point. And it was really a sad time for me. It was a difficult time because you really don't have. For example, one Deconversion at this point in 2017, you have a bunch of sites, you have a bunch of Facebook pages or so where you can ask. At that point, there's no one, it's just me. And I spent maybe a couple of more months until I found the term agnostic. I've never heard the term agnostic.
Wow.
And I think this is what I am right now. Okay, I don't believe now. I don't think I believe in God right now. I don't think I believe in God anymore. But I still not ready. Not ready. I don't want to give it away, or say it doesn't exist. So I'm an agnostic. I withhold my judgment until better evidence comes about.
And at that point, did you confide in anybody? Did you tell anyone you knew that you were having some doubts?
My mother.
Uh-oh.
Man.
Uh-oh.
I was happy. It was, for me, it was like an epiphany and say, I'm an agnostic. Because I thought, it never occurred to me that they were going to be so shocked. Because as I told you, I had a liberal upbringing. Even if I was Catholic, it was a liberal upbringing.
Thanks for listening to Voices of Deconversion. Be sure to join us next time by subscribing to the podcast. If you have a deconversion story you would like to share, email us at steve@vodpodcast.com.